Well, Shabbat Shalom, y'all. We've got some kids playing in the corner, so I'll try to keep it a little louder, get over their volume. But it's cool if they want to talk. I get it. It's exciting. I'll be here in person. Yeah, together. Yeah, we'll see how this works. I want to try it out. I like kids in the sanctuary. It's a good value. I want them to be able to hear the melodies. So we'll try as long as we can. And then if they start getting troublesome, someone tell me, and we'll rearrange from there. Okay, cool. Well, welcome and thank you for being here. We're going to start with candle lighting, and our board member Daniel is going to light the candles for us on page 120.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Okay, it's so good to see all of you here today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlikner shel Shabbat.
Beautiful. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, and then we're lucky here to have Genevieve with us. She's going to be our cantoral soloist. So we're going to start on, I think, page one. Hine Matov? So is that your repertoire? Cool. Hine Matov.
Great. On 128. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gal yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gal yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Okay, moving on to Lechadodi on page 138. Genevieve, for you, is it 1, 2, 5, and 9?
Yes.
Okay, great. So paragraph 1, 2, 5, and 9. We arrive at paragraph 9. I encourage you all to stand up and face the entrance to greet the Shabbat ride.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shemor v'zachor b'diburecha, ishmiyanu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shem u'tiferet ve'itiha. Lecha dodi lecha dodi likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha, ki hi mekor habracha, berosh mekidem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machasha v'techila. Lecha dodi lecha dodi likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, ki ba'orei kuli ori, uri shir daberi, kevod Adonai dalikliga. Lecha dodi, lecha dodi likrat בואי בשלום התרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי, דודי, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated. Chatzikash, is that you or me? That's you. That's me. Okay. We're moving on to the Chatzikash on page 144. Yitgedal v'yitgeda shemei rabba be'alma divrach yotev yamlik machutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayedechol beit Yisrael bagala bagala uvizman karev v'imaru amen. Yehesh me rabba mivarach le'alam ulal me'al maya yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitbramam ve'yitnaseh ve'yithadar ve'yitale ve'yitalal shemei dekudesha barichu le'elam in kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma ve'imaru amen. And now we're moving over to the Baruch on page 146, and when you arrive there, I invite you to stand with us. You may be seated. We're going to turn now to the top of page 149 and invite you all to read the English with me together. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, ma'ariv aravim. We're going to continue now in the English on top of page 151. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Oheb Amo Yisrael. For the Shabbat this evening, we're going to read it, of course, as a community, a kahal, and then before we get into the Via Haftarah, we're going to have a few moments of silent reflection and meditation. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malechuto Leolam Vaed. Turn to page 154 of V'ahavta. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meyodecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shinartam levarnecha b'divarta ba'am v'shivtecha b'veitecha U'b'techa havaderech, u'shofbecha u'vkumecha, u'kshartam leyot al yadecha, v'hayu l'totafot beineinecha, u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha. L'ma'an tizkeru v'atzitem echol mitzvotai, v'tem kiroshim leiloechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeti etchem meretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem leElohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. We now move over to Mika Mocha on page 158.
Mi hamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, norati lo osefele.
Now move to Hashkivenu on page 160.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom. Ve'ha'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen.
In the Shamru on page 162.
Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. בני ובן בני ישראל, בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל Shabbat Ledor Beritolam. Ubayom HaShavi Shabbat Vainafash Shabbat Vainafash Shabbat Vainafash Veshamru V'nei Israel Et HaShabbat Lasot Et HaShabbat Ledorotam Beritolam.
We're now moving to the Amidah on page 164. When you arrive there, I invite you to stand with us. Adonai Sefataitika Ubiya B'Tanivatecha. Adonai Sefataitika Ubiya B'Tanivatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Ishak Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol V'Ha'Gibor V'Hanorah El Elyon Yom Chasad Tovi the Konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevi Gula L'bnei B'neihem, L'man Shemo Yahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach L'makeh, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham et Rasara. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, V'tayeh HaKol HaKara V'yoshia. Mashiach Ruach Mari Hagashem, Mechakel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayeh HaKol B'Rachamim. So Mechnoli V'Rofei Choli, U'Matir Rasuri, U'Mechayeh Enunato, Mishnei Ahava. Michamocha v'avirut, u'midom melech, melech merit u'mechayeh, u'masmir Yeshua, ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol, baruch atah Adonai, l'chayeh hakol. All right, everyone, we're going to read silently until page 180. Maybe seated whenever you like.
Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael, vimru Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael.
Thank you, Genevieve. And now some words of Torah. So this week's portion has like a strange passage, and it comes from Leviticus 14, and it goes like this. It goes, God says, when you enter the land of Canaan that I give you as possession, and I inflict an intrusive plague upon a house in the land you possess, the owner of the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, something like a plague has appeared upon my home. So I'm going to need some time to unpack this passage. First off, I like to point out the Israelites are currently wandering around in the desert and no one there owns permanent homes. The 40 years of wandering has not happened yet. So they're receiving instructions that are not even actionable for at least 40 plus years. So there's that problem. Secondly, the word for plague here in Hebrew is sara'at. This is the same word used for contagious skin rash. Last week, I mentioned that sara'at is often a term confused for Hansen's disease, or as I like to call it, Hollywood leprosy. Sara'at was contagious, but could have been anything from a benign skin rash to a deadly bacteria eating away at one's skin and nervous system. And you may have noticed that history took the most dramatic interpretation of sara'at as seen in many Hollywood films concerning leprosy. Anyways, apparently homes get it too. And the prevailing thought is that sara'at of a home is not a flesh-eating bacteria, but mold, which is still pretty dangerous. Which leads to my third point. Adonai is admitting that this plague is created by God. To me, this is a big admission. In fact, nowhere else in Leviticus does Adonai admit that sara'at comes from God, only when it comes to homes. Just like sara'at for people, this means that a home is quarantined from 7 to 14 days. And if the sara'at does not go away, the house is destroyed, stone by stone. Rashi, who is probably Judaism's most famous Torah commentator, has such a hilariously bizarre reason for this. And he wrote, because the Amorites concealed treasures of gold in the walls of their houses during the whole 40 years the Israelites were in the wilderness, in order that these might not possess the gold when they conquered the land. And in consequence of the plague, they pull down the house and discover the gold. Essentially, Rashi is trying to spin this into a positive thing. The Israelites are apparently living in old Amorite houses. Whenever an Amorite home contracts sara'at, it means one could find gold. And since this is a godly admitted problem, God wants the recent homeowner to find the gold. Now, I first took this as a ridiculous and hilarious interpretation. However, when I started to read other commentators' take on this passage, I began to truly understand Rashi's position. The fact that God admits to plaguing homes is deeply troubling for our rabbinic ancestors. Because if God does something, ancient theology dictates that it was for a reason. Thus, biblical theology and post-biblical theology, pretty much up to modernity, suggests that a person deserves the punishment received by God. A person deserves a bad thing happening to them. And this leads us into an unfortunate rabbit hole. Because if you are living in Canaan, just trying to get through your day as best as you can, and find mold in your home, then your life gets so much harder for two difficult reasons. The first is that your house is quarantined, and you can't enter it from 7 to 14 days. The second, and probably harder, is the stigma that somehow you deserve this punishment. And our scholarly ancestors were anything if not creative about the crime such a person could have committed. And I have a list. Perhaps this mold means that the homeowner seized the home violently. Maybe the homeowner bore a false witness while in the house, or the homeowner was too stingy and essentially not willing to share household items. Perhaps they were not willing to donate their money to charity. Maybe the homeowner was being made an example of for the rest of the community. These are all suggestions presented by our ancient scholars for why a homeowner's house is moldy. And I can't imagine the untold damage these discussions made for people who just want to live in a home worry-free and happen to notice some mold on their walls. So back to Rashi. What was a ridiculous and flippant position hits home in the context of these other scholars' discussions. Rashi offered an explanation that does not stigmatize nor demonize a person with a moldy house. Furthermore, the weight of his authority as Judaism's #1 Torah commentator provides a home for an explanation that did not harm others. Now, all people who are blamed for having moldy homes can refer to Rashi, a household name, in their defense. And this is why I love Judaism. What on the surface looks to be a funny and whimsical comment turns out to be a brave, valuable, and helpful position for Jews. One could argue that Rashi's silly comment is a critique on previous scholars' outlandish claims of why God omits the plaguing homes. That Rashi's comment is a proportioned response to the insane logic of victim blaming. There is a lesson for us right here and right now, because currently in our country, trans people and members of the LGBTQ community are being treated as if they have sara'at, as if God gave them sara'at and that it is their fault. It is, of course, a classic and particularly cruel case of victim blaming. Judaism teaches us that all people are created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Thus, each person is a unique expression of God. And Rashi teaches us that we can be creative, even whimsical, in our protest. And one of my favorite examples of creative protesting happening right now is the Birds Are Not Real movement. A group of people, mostly younger, are going around claiming that birds are not real, but are actually drone replicas installed by the government to spy on Americans. Protesters have been seen over at the Twitter headquarters asking them to change their logo. And a little bit like Rashi's comment, at first glance, this seems like conspiracy-fueled crackpot, a protest that's completely disinterested with reality. However, upon closer examination, you'll find that its founder is quoted as saying, "It's a way to combat troubles in the world that you don't really have other ways of combating." He continues, "My favorite way to describe the organization is fighting lunacy with lunacy." The Bird Brigade, as protesters lovingly call themselves, can be found offering counter-protests at major political anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ rallies. Their goal is to de-escalate protests and provide a home for people that want to put a mirror in front of protesters rallying around misinformation. And I think our country needs more of this. Protests that highlight silliness, whimsy, and the ridiculousness can be a form of bravery. They can be an intelligent and creative response to victim blaming, a critique to harmful and cruel policies that illogically discriminate against the other. But most importantly, they make space for those who just want to live their lives and then go home. Thank you. We're now going to move on to the Misha Berach, the prayer for healing, which you can find on page 371 of your prayer books. This is the one you do, right? Okay. And before we move into the melody, here are the members of our community who are in need of healing. Tina Mink, Chris Converse, Jennifer Eskridge, Ian Clift, David Tobias, Katie Flagel, Lindsay Raber, Micah Purdy, Cheryl Lambriani, Laura Allen, Susan Super, Mary Jo Robinson, Melba Cook, Emmy Webb, Stephen Lamp, Russell Crass, Bill Ross, Alan Friedman, Russ Nog, Ross Rumack, Norma Haas, Ray Ellis, Judy Cantor, Carol Riven, Diane Kaplan, Craig Paulus, Philip Kaufman, Nicole Neeson, Jane Anderson, Louis Mayer, Lillian Mayer, Margie Bauman, Ariel Lamp, Emily Weaver, Gingy Spiro, and James Brown Sr. If there's someone who you are thinking of who's in need of healing, please feel free to say their names out loud or in your hearts.
Mishebera Avotenu Mekor Habrecha Veimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach Imotenu Mekor Habrecha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you. We now move to the Elenu, which you can find on page 587 of your prayer books. When you arrive there, I invite you to stand with us. I arrived there. Elenu l'shabbat la'adon ha'kol la'tehu la'leser breshi shehu samchel kini le'eched et shemo v'goralanu lahamlik machuto la'nachnu tori u'mishacharim u'modim Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Turn to page 591. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Love each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech. May we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity, and cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas. And light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech ha'kol ha'aretz v'yom ha'hu yihyeh Adonai echad u'shemo We now turn to the mourner's Kaddish on page 598. In our own community, we're thinking about these yard sites for the Shabbat, and it's Francis Kaminer, Joseph Cohen, Noah Connors, Mayor Dushman, Bobby Goldberg, Betty Grinker, Sorrel Grinker, Adeline Horowitz, Mary Kerman, Lila Leviton, Kim Miller, Louis Posner, Sarah Rosenblatt, and Michael Rumack, and William Weiser. And we're in the period of Shloshim for Charlie Foter. If there's anyone who you are thinking of, please feel free to say their names out loud or in your hearts. Zikunim livracha, remember to be for a blessing. Yit Gedal, Yit Gedash, Shemei Rabbah. Be'elma divrach hayotev yamlik machute. v'chayechan u'yamechan u'v'cheir chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mebarak le'olam u'lomei almaya. Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitbramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei kudusha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata. Ta'amiran ve'alma v'emru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim alini v'akol Yisrael v'emru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Alini kol Yisrael v'emru. Amen. Is the one who creates harmony on high, bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. You may be seated. Okay, announcements. Oh boy, see if I can remember anything. Okay, so tomorrow we have our usual text day at 10:30. Tomorrow is a Torah Uncensored at noon, and my friend and colleague Rabbi Daniel Alter will be teaching it this Sunday, or this Saturday. So you can, if you're a member, you can still join for free. And so, anyways, we got that going on. Religious school will be on Sunday in the synagogue at 10. So that's been pretty fun. And then Passover. So we plan to have our community Seder here in person on the evening of April 16th at 6 p.m. If you want to volunteer, Daniel Clift is organizing our volunteers over here. Just wave, Daniel. Yeah, there you go. So you can go to him if you want to help out. We'd love more volunteers always. And if you are volunteering, thank you. And then morning minyan is every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Am I missing anything? What am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something, right? You think I got it all? Okay. Yes. Okay, which is a Friday, right? Okay, so if youth group's having a Seder on the 22nd after Shabbat services, okay, cool. That's exciting. All right. I think that's all the announcements. I think there's more. Oh, yes. A new episode of my podcast, What Divines is available. This one's about Passover, and Pastor Matt Schultz talks about Easter. And then we argue a lot about Batman on this one. So just FYI, we get a little off topic on this particular podcast. Okay. I think that's everything, right? Yeah, that's everything. Okay. We're going to now have our closing melody, which is Shalom Aleichem. We give the page number on that one?
That's 106:27.
627, Shalom Aleichem for our closing melody. Let's get started.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharei, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seichem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a safe drive home. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Okay. Awesome job, Andy. Well done. Thank you so much. No. Why? You feel it?
Every month, this baby is a little bit more in my lungs. Thank you.